Guys, welcome again to another episode of Coffee with Mirko, a show where we talk with coffee professionals from all over the world to bring you some knowledge, tips, inspiration, motivation for your coffee journey, and not only, even as well as business. So, as usual, before I introduce the next guest, I will brew myself a cup of coffee. So get yourself a cup of coffee, because we're gonna have a good chat today with our friend Simon Gautherin. Is a French barista, SCA specialized and qualified. Is also a Q grader, and is just a good personality in the coffee industry. He's a trainer, educator, and he really knows his stuff. So today we're brewing an AeroPress as usual. This is my favorite method at home as a filter. Welcome everyone. So once we brew the coffee, we'll be talking with Simon. He actually works in a company that I used to work for, so we're gonna talk about that a little bit. So if you're interested in coffee, this is exactly the place to be. Simon is really well educated and well knowledgeable when it comes down to coffee, sensory especially. But we're gonna ask him about his journey, and yeah, stay tuned. So this is done. Simon is in the house. I'm sure he recognizes this mug. It's time to say hi to a few of you guys. Hey, Cafe Moya, or Moja, Cafe Quib, Alex, Ali, Mathieu Vive, Jesus, what's good? I hope you guys are all safe. Hassan Cafe, hope you guys are safe. Today we're brewing a local roaster called Greenlock Coffee Roasters. It's a natural Mexican filter coffee, and my very loyal AeroPress, which it never fails you. Cafe Three Little Birds, what's good? So once we plunge this, we're gonna chit chat with Simon, and I'm looking forward to meet him and have a good chat about coffee. Usually we got 60 seconds. If you want to ask questions, send them through. I might read them straight away or in a few minutes. And this is a good chance if you want to learn more about coffee, because he's really all about education, and he really explained lots of complicated things in a very simple manner. So it's a good chance for you to learn a thing or two. Hey Saud, Luke, Tyron, and I Build and Create. How's everyone? Our guest will join us very shortly, literally in a matter of minutes. Just once I finish plunging this, and then we can get started. Cafe Three Little Birds. I like AeroPress. Yeah, me too. I love the AeroPress. But that's because I'm a little bit lazy. I'm actually purchasing V60 because I'm receiving some amazing coffee in the next coming weeks. It's a bit of a surprise what coffee is gonna be, and I need something a little bit more delicate than an AeroPress. Maybe I'll ask that question to Simon. Hey, but here it is. I always wait for the show to drink my first cup of coffee, so I really need it, and I'm gonna really enjoy it. Things y cosas, good to see you again. Thank you all guys for coming around. Today is another special episode, and if you missed it, I'm gonna type down who we're talking to, and hopefully my spelling will be right. Ring. Maybe we'll add a French flag and ask your questions. Q and A. Beautiful. All right, well, let's bring him on and ask any questions. Cheers from San Diego.
Bonjour. How's it going?
Sorry, I missed that. The connection must be a little bit lagging a little bit.
That's all right. I mean, it works fine for me.
Okay, cool. Hey man, how you doing?
Yeah, good, good. Well, I'm also having my first cup of coffee of the day.
Ah, and I'm sure you recognize this mug.
Yeah, I saw the mug. Yeah, good one, very good one. I don't even have one.
You should. I don't know if they still make them. It was when Toby's launched the Mexican coffee, and funny enough, I'm drinking a Mexican coffee today. And I'm glad you got coffee because a lot of my guests they probably had too much coffee through the day during the week, so they don't have a cup of coffee. So we're actually having coffee together, which is pretty cool. But yeah, thanks for coming. And first things first, you and your family are good. Family back in France, but you guys are good as far as the virus and all of that.
Yeah,
Good,
yeah, pretty good. Yeah, and well, I'm in Sydney, so Sydney is actually really good right now. So yeah,
good, good to
everyone's all
hear.
good.
That's number one
Yeah.
priority.
Funny thing
Look,
is, I actually managed to get out of France just before well, in the middle of the outbreak, and I managed to catch the last flight out of France back to Australia. Otherwise, I would have been stuck in France for probably,
because you were there for the French Brewers Cup
yeah, that's right.
competition.
Yeah, which was canceled eventually, but yeah, that's right.
Yeah, 100%. Cool, man. Let's just get a kick going because for people as well, we're gonna tune in later and they're gonna rewatch this. How did you start your coffee journey all the way from France?
Yeah, so I started brewing coffee at home. I think like a lot of people who start working in coffee. I was enjoying drinking coffee and I was going to a bunch of cafes and sometimes I was getting coffee from these guys. So I was having, let's say, an Ethiopian on espresso and then trying to do the same thing at home. And for some reason, it was never really working. So you taste the coffee, at your local cafe, you try to replicate the same thing and it just doesn't taste the same. And so it couldn't be the coffee because I was buying the same beans. So then I started, digging a little bit into how to make a good cup of coffee. And that's how pretty quickly realized it was really difficult to get information on how to make coffee. Information online was actually it was all over the place. You had a lot of contradictory information. So some people would say something and then other people would say the opposite. And it was really, yeah, really confusing. So as I finished my bachelor degree in business and management, I was preparing for my master degree. I was going to Australia for my master degree, and I decided to start working as a barista just to have a part-time job to get started. And eventually, when I graduated, I just didn't want to work in consulting or work in strategy anymore, and just decided to work in coffee. And like I said, I thought it was a big avenue in education.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us starts with that. Our journey starts with, I need to make a little bit of money. That looks like the right way. Baristas these days look also cool, so they might be able to have a bit of fun while they work. And I suppose that when we're going to touch base on that later, I think that still your master degree and being a consultant played in your favor as far as knowing how to teach, knowing how to consult even coffee businesses. So I think that it comes hand in hand with what you do, and which is pretty cool. You didn't study to become a doctor or a lawyer, and now you're a barista. That would be kind of very far from each other.
Yeah.
And what were your steps in terms of your career? You started obviously from France, and from there, where did you move up?
Yeah, so I did actually a pretty long course, a coffee barista course in France. It was like a 2-week course. It was pretty intense. It was around 60 hours of training, which was really, really good. And then just after that, I went to Sydney and I started working in a local cafe near the city. And yeah, worked as a barista for a year and then moved back to Europe for 6 months for studies and then worked in a specialty coffee shop in Prague and then back to Sydney. So I've worked for a few years as a barista and took some head barista positions and then started doing basically consulting for cafes because consulting was my sort of major in school. So that was something I knew how to do. Basically.
Cool, man. And yeah, and basically you just started learning, studying, and I also really like what you do on your Instagram. As you know, I'm in social media myself, so I'm all about content creation, and I appreciate what you do. I think it's actually made your example yesterday talking to someone on a private phone call, because I think you just nail your niche. You really, I think with social media, it's really important to be always on context. So your context is education, and you just like, whether it's in a funny way or more serious, it's always consistently around there, which I think is really brilliant. So who was, surely more than one, but who was a strong and positive influence for your coffee journey, coffee career, I suppose?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think there's one person in particular, but there's a bunch of people I've met along the way. I think enthusiastic baristas. I've met a few coffee buyers, a couple coffee roasters when I first started, and just having a chat with a variety of different people that were so passionate about what they did was actually really, I think, a trigger for me to change industry and to change career. I think it's one of the few industries where you see people actually loving their job despite not necessarily earning a lot of money. Because to be honest, there's not as much money to be made in coffee than there is in finance, investment banking, or consulting. Like, that's for sure. But still, people are pretty happy with what they do, and they wake up early, they work long hours. Sometimes the job can be difficult, although it looks cool to be a barista behind a machine. It's not an easy job, and yeah, people seem to love it, and there's a huge passion, and these people inspired me to start working in coffee.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that passion drives the baristas to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, smash dockets all day, every day, and then after that, they practice 5-6 hours a day. I know. Well, we both know plenty of those people, and I think passion is a core element. Finance is great, banking is great. I'm not sure how many of them they are just as happy as they would be by following their passion, which could be cooking, coffee, or pottery. You know what I'm saying? So it's very interesting. So you're a barista, Q grader, trainer, consultant. But what would you pick? In an ideal world, what would it look like your best possible job ever in terms of what, that incorporates the core passion of yours? Is it more to do with people, more to do with roasting, more to do with competition, or owning a cafe?
Yeah, I think, like I said, education was what also got me into coffee. The fact that I quickly saw the gap in education. I quickly saw that there was a lot of things to be done. And I think this is 100% where I would want to see myself. So not necessarily, teaching all day, every day, but, being able to create content, being able to convey that content out there, and being able to make sure that more people have access to good educational content, making sure that more people can, start working in coffee, because it's still a real struggle for a lot of people around the world. Not just in Australia, all across Europe. I have people asking me, how do I get started, in coffee? How do I get my first job as a barista? No one wants to hire me because I don't have experience, and it's hard for me to find a proper training that would get me a job afterwards. So if I could do something that, solves this whole sort of equation, that would be my ideal job. Sort of like having a curriculum sort of degree that you do after high school, that would be coffee. So some people go to a law school, some people study architecture. You can go to a cooking school, or you could go to a coffee school where you spend, let's say, 2 years making coffee, learning how to operate a cafe, roasting, cupping. I think if you studied coffee for 2 years full time, you would be actually really, really knowledgeable. And you probably have, the skill set of someone who's been in the industry for many, many years. I think education is a powerful tool that can sort of boost your career really quickly, and that's something I would love to be doing in the future.
That's wonderful. And look, I think you're right. I think some people are more hands-on, some people are more academic as well. So different things for different people. But yeah, there isn't out there necessarily a lot of what you just said. And during this live show, today's episode 16, which is crazy. We just started only a couple of weeks ago, and we had amazing guests, and as usual, like yourself today. a lot of people ask, how do I start? How do I do latte art? How do I do this and that? My general advice, I suppose, or opinion is, in this day and age, everyone is a click or two away. Like, I think, find the mentors, find the people that inspire you, find the people that you look up to, flick them a message. Like, the worst case scenario is that they're not going to even see your message because it's going to be sitting in there, thousands of requests. Well, then send them an email, or send an email to their major company. You know, like, you know, there's guys that I reached out that I haven't responded yet because they have, you know, 1 million+ followers, and, you know, as if they're going to see my message, you know, but that's okay. So I think finding the right mentors in your city, or, you know, the next suburb or the next city, is definitely important. And even reaching out people like yourself. I mean, you know, sometimes you might be saying, hey, look, I actually just released a video last week about how to brew a V60, just go and check it out, you know, and that could be just it. Now, I think you're onto something, because we know that there's without getting in trouble, but there are a lot of barista courses out there, and I've seen lots of customers who would come to me and say, hey, I've done a barista course, and I'm like, okay, we know which ones are. Now, a big shout out to Nick Ray. I saw that he's in the house. He just say hi. So, hey, Nick, if you're still watching. I mean, hey, everyone, but Nick is head barista at Tubbs Estate, where I used to work, and Simon is currently working. We kind of go there in a bit. So as far as competition go, what's your current goal, or where do you see you going? Because you just, obviously, French Brewers Cup just, you know, was called off.
Yeah. So it was that was going to be my first SCA competition. So I had been preparing for this one for around 10 months, almost full year of preparation, and unfortunately it was, well, not canceled, but sort of postponed to later this year. So we'll see when this is taking place. But I actually really enjoyed the whole process of preparing for a comp. I really enjoy what happens behind the scene. I think being on stage is also definitely something that I would enjoy doing. I love competing in general, not just in coffee, but I just like the process in the sense that it sort of pushes you, you push your boundaries, you push knowledge. You're always constantly trying to learn new things, unlearn. And I actually really enjoyed having to forget everything I thought I knew about filter coffee a year ago, and having to relearn everything from scratch. So everything that I sort of took for granted, I had to unlearn it and then learn it again. Do a lot of experiments. And I think, I mean, going back to education, I think this is a great way to learn things. And I also saw competition for me. I thought it was a good way to learn things, but also share things at the same time, which again goes back to that education side of things. It's a little bit like research and development in a company. There's a few coffee companies that see coffee competitions as research and development. So it's, you know, it's a way to work on a new grinder, or maybe work on new hybrid varieties of coffee, or new fermentation techniques, that sort of stuff. And I think this is one of the things that pushes the industry forward. This is how we get, you know, new varieties every year. This is how coffee tastes better and better each year. What seems to be lacking, though, with competition is how it translates to the general public and how it translates to the real world. And it seems that the gap between what you can get in a cafe and, you know, the coffees that you taste in competition seems to be getting bigger and bigger each year. And I think that's, again, another gap that we could be trying to bridge through education.
100%, and I love what you just said. And I'll go back to my questions in a second, because there's a question from the viewers. But yeah, competition, the gap between competition cafes is big. I do see certain moves and certain trends that are, you know, we're kind of getting closer and closer. Like, for example, I've chatted with 3 amazing females baristas, and you know, like, for instance, the competitions have enabled more and more girls and women into coffee. So I think that's, you know, growing as well. Like, yesterday was with Nicole Barfeld. I spoke to Andrea Allen not long ago, GB, and Aga tomorrow, all these amazing girls. So I think, when more and more educators like yourself start competing, we'll also create a platforms for you to expand your movement. Just look what happened with South Korea and the trend of being a barista, So I think that it's a slow pace, but yeah, you're 100% right, man. I like what you said. Now, here is, hi Simon, sir, can you share me your secret parameter for espresso? Oh, this is a broad question.
Yeah. It is a broad question. I don't think there's any secret recipe for coffees and parameters, like you may call. The way I usually see recipes for espresso and filter is that it doesn't work for every coffee. And a recipe here in Sydney might not work in Melbourne, it might not work in Seoul or Tokyo or wherever. I think what's really important is to be able to have a starting point and navigate as quickly as possible, which is called dialing in. And so make a coffee with a set of parameters, and then how's that coffee tasting? What is it you don't like about it, and what is it you would want out of that coffee? I mean, assuming it's realistic. And what are the variables that you're going to change in your equation in order to get to that result? But again, there's no short answer to this, and I'd say it takes years and years and probably even decades to get to that point, where you taste something and you're like, cool, I want to change this, and that, and then this is the different parameters that I'm going to change to get to that result. So sorry, I'm not really answering your question, but I think it's a difficult one.
No, it's also, there's also a holistic or a more, I think also the answer, and it's something that we always go back to, is at the end of the day, the best recipe is the one that you drink and you think you're really enjoying what you're drinking. I think ultimately you might be liking, I don't know, a lot of chocolate and bitterness. I might be enjoying the more acidity, the better. It's like the Cardelli has a lovely T-shirt which says acidity is not a crime, but then you talk to other major coffee people and they're like, nah, I can't do acidity, and that's okay. It's like, I like apples, you like pears. That's how it goes. But yeah, I think you're right. I think eventually, after decades, as individuals, we'll get there to that parameter for ourselves as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that you brought with the. So I'm just going back to this with the.
Please.
The best recipe is the recipe that you enjoy. I posted this survey a couple of months ago called the Flavor Pyramid, asking people what sort of flavors they prefer in coffee, and the answers were sort of all over the place. I mean, there seems to be a consensus that people like red fruits and tropical fruits in coffee, but when it comes to chocolate and citrus, these are really polarizing. Some people think that chocolate in coffee is amazing, and some people think that if you're getting lemon and orange notes, it's not that pleasant. And again, it just depends on what you want to get out of your cup.
Yeah, and I think there's a responsibility that we coffee professionals need to bear in mind as well when we start also using very, very, and again, it's a lot of marketing, but when it comes down to tasting notes as well, just to make it a little bit more accessible, I think we can start looking in that direction eventually in the future. I think that, sometimes there's some words that they are there, I get it, but I think, how you were saying about reducing that gap between where the competition is and it's your average cafe. I think also in terms of tastes, to make it more accessible for people to be like, oh yeah, I do taste orange, rather than Jaffa cake or something more creative. Which again, it's marketing, so I get it. Here's another question. What do you think about steel filter in step of others? I think referring to using stainless steel filter or filter, not filter.
Not sure to understand the question.
No, it's yeah. I guess the question is, maybe stainless steel filter versus paper
Yeah,
filter.
paper filter. Yeah. Yeah, I've never really been a big fan of stainless steel filters, just because they let go through a lot of coffee oils and a lot of very fine particles, and that gives a bit of a sort of dry mouthfeel, bitter taste, and just not as clean, not as pleasant. So yeah, I would definitely recommend using.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Simon, and thanks for the question. Now she's closing it perfectly, because she said it took me a lot of time to understand that it's all about what I taste I like most, which is perfect to close that topic. Going back to France, because you were there just a couple of months ago. France and Italy, as far as specialty coffee scene goes, are quite similar. Or your traditional coffee, it's like you guys got French press, and then we got the mocha pot, but we know where it is. It's very traditional, I suppose. How do you think that these two countries could move forward and advance and innovate?
I'm not super familiar with the specialty coffee market in Italy, but I'll speak for France because I mean, I know about this one. I think the funny thing is, like you said, France and Italy have sort of their traditional way of drinking coffee is actually really similar. We have this tradition of drinking really dark roasted Robusta that you get in cafes. You just get a quick espresso, €1 espresso at the counter of a bistro, counter of a bar, and at home people make French press in France, or they make mocha pot in Italy, or vice versa. And the whole specialty movement is a lot of light roasted coffee, a lot of coffees that have brightness, acidity, that's the complete opposite from what the traditional coffee scene is like in Italy or in France, with that smoky, bitter kind of coffee. So I think that we went way too far from what coffee was. And if you want to make sure that specialty coffee attracts more people, I think you need to sort of go back a little bit where it was before to sort of capture that market. Because right now, I think specialty coffee in France is probably less than 1% of the market, and you have more and more coffee shops and more roasters fighting for that 1% of the market. So, but instead of trying to fight for that 1%, you should just try to expand the pie, and then just try to expand your sort of potential customer base. So people who are drinking instant coffee at home, or people who are buying these non-specialty commodity coffee and that did drink from at home. So I guess honestly, when I went back to Paris a month and a half ago this year, I was actually surprised to see so many specialty coffee roasters roasting so light. Like everything I tasted was extremely light, and sometimes for some of them was almost underdeveloped. Was really sour, it was grassy. A lot of the coffees I tried were vegetal. And the funny thing is, I knew some of these coffee lots because I tasted them in Australia from different roasters, and some of them were developed a little bit further, so darker roasted, let's say. And yeah, I'm pretty sure if I gave one of these cups to someone in my family who's not necessarily super into specialty coffee, but I likes drinking coffee, they wouldn't enjoy it, just because, I mean, I think there's a sweet spot between something that's smoky and bitter and something that's vegetal and extremely sour. And I think this is how you can sort of expand the market.
100%. And I think your answer goes hand in hand with the concept that Alberto from Tostato Specialty Coffee in Italy is a shop in Brescia that I visited years back, and I had him last Friday. He has a similar concept, but it's more around service and the overall experience. So if someone wants their classic, even though it's not €1 in his shop, espresso, he has a little bit of a blend. It's a little bit closer, but it's all about the experience. So he developed and designed the shop for, okay, you want your at the counter espresso, go and see you later, which is more familiar with what you're used to. I'm not going to scare you with siphons and AeroPresses in your face. But then in the back of the shop, because it's like an L shape, it's like you can go downstairs and it's more like a specialized areas where you get to see all the tools. You get to, you know, sit down at the bar where they brew, filter in front of you. So I think you're right. I like the way they describe it, especially for the roasters, because it's all about brand a lot of times. And if someone's like, wow, I really like this brand, they might get attached to a certain blend, but then eventually they might start exploring, because we always look for something new eventually. And if you just, you know, you just look at the big brands like Starbucks or Nescafe or Nespresso, even they have like, you know, hey, we got the market because people are coming to us. What else can we do? You know, and it's interesting. I think your approach is, yeah, what you said, yeah, maybe, yeah, tick the boxes in my brain. It makes a lot of sense for sure.
I think, yeah, I agree with the approach of this cafe that you mentioned. It's really interesting that they did this, because that's also something I've observed practically almost everywhere outside of Australia. Going into cafes, the workflow in cafes outside of Australia is actually horrendous. It's actually horrible, seriously. Like, cafes are terrible at operating, and no one is half as good as what Starbucks can be. I think, you know, you can say whatever you want about Starbucks, and yes, their coffee is shit and all of that, but they have 26,000 stores. The coffee tastes exactly the same everywhere, and these guys are extremely efficient. They'll have 10 times more customers per employee than your average specialty coffee shop in a European capital, and they'll be consistent, and they'll be quick. They'll be super fast. That's something I think that, like you said, is very intimidating for the average customer who's not really used to going to specialty cafes. It's always like, okay, where do I order? Is it table service or do I order at the counter? No one's really looking after me because the barista is busy behind the machine. Who's on the floor and who's behind the machine? It's always really confusing everywhere you go in Europe. And that was the same thing when I went to the States. It was the same thing when I went to in a couple of different countries in Asia. I've never seen a specialty coffee industry in a country that was as good as what Australia is in terms of standards and everything.
Yeah, thanks, dude. That's amazing. And sorry, when you mentioned 26,000 shops, the video just quickly froze. Did you mean Starbucks?
Yeah, Starbucks. Yeah, I think they have like 26,000 shops around the world, I think.
And it's interesting. Insane. It's interesting that you mentioned Starbucks, because I'm actually glad that you mentioned Starbucks, because it's like a big taboo word between us versus them. But I agree with you. First of all, there was a time around Christmas period that I needed a spot with the Wi-Fi, and I like coffee at nighttime, very Melbourne. At 4 p.m. everyone shuts. So it was nighttime. I was desperate for a cold brew. I had a cold brew Starbucks, and man, I finished it. I'm not embarrassed of anything. It tastes good. And they had Wi-Fi, and they knew what the consumer wanted. And it's funny how they went all the way to Italy a couple of years back to open a Monster Roastery Reserve specialty in Milan. So it just goes and show that research development, research and analysis, research the market aspect of it, where like, wow, they are doing kind of specialty coffee in Milan. So they obviously know that people will go to them because of their strength of brand. And then eventually, once you're in the door, they can sell, cross-sell, upsell, or suggest different beverages, which eventually they'll probably expand on their retail and e-commerce, because it's all interconnected. And that's what I love about these kind of big companies. Nothing is there randomly, and you're right about service. And just to finish that off, because it's something that I've mentioned a couple of times, and I like people to start rephrasing their shops or their mindset. I think sometimes with specialty, we're so focused in the cup or in the jug or in the technical analysis or in the tools, and our eyes are 45 degrees angle downwards. I think if we want to serve and offer a special product to match that, we need to also offer a special service, a special experience. And that's why you go to certain fine dining restaurants and you pay $300 a head, but from the way they put the napkin on top of your legs all the way to how they pour water is very different than, a fast food chain restaurant. So I think that to experience service needs to match the quality of the product. But yeah, thanks for your insights, man. That was great.
There's a funny, not funny, but interesting figure I came across shortly after I got into coffee, which was on the French coffee consumption market. And that figure was that only 20% of people who drink espresso actually enjoy it. And so basically 20% of people you'll see in a cafe actually go and sit down and have an espresso because they like it. I think it was 40% do it for the social aspect of it, so just to meet up with a friend or something, and then 40% do it for the actual effects of caffeine on your brain and body. So you only have 20% of people who do it because they actually enjoy drinking coffee, and the rest do it for other reasons. And I think, like you say, if you just focus on what's on the cup, on the technicalities, then you're only sort of really addressing that 20%, and you're forgetting about these 80% of customers. And I think that number has always resonated in my head for a lot of decision making in coffee. Like you put yourself in your customer's shoes.
That's cool. Like see, I like you because you got all this data that because obviously you do lots of reading, lots of research, which is great. And I really hope that the people are going to rewatch this, they're going to look you up and come to you in terms of your social handles and sort of start connecting with you because you offer lots of value on your page. And I really like to see people when they're a little bit more academic or they're really enjoying studying and learning, because it's right the opposite than me, because I'm just not made in that way, but that's okay. That's why I appreciate it. And it's great, man. So which brings me kind of to the next question, even though you certainly answered part of it, but for people tuning in, what's your mission in coffee? It's basically broaden that education aspect and making everyone happy and more knowledgeable, I suppose. That's what kind of you said.
Yeah, I think, well, the mission is a little bit different from what I guess of all the answers sort of going to be different from what I would love to do eventually. But I think that one of the reasons why I think education is so important to me is I think education is one of those things that can bridge the gaps between social inequalities. And that's one of the things that actually I've always stood for in life and politics and all of that. I think that something that drives me crazy, drives me mental is social inequalities that you may have between populations within the same country or between countries. And I think education is one of the ways that you can empower a certain type of people to make sure that you can sort of reduce inequalities and give everyone the same chance to succeed in life, in their life, in their career or whatever. So that is sort of part of the broader mission. And it happens to be in coffee. So.
And that's beautiful. And I think it's a great industry because pretty much, I don't want to say a percentage, but a large slice of the population can get a job as a barista. It's accessible where you have coffee shops, as well as the internet. So the information is out there, and that's beautiful, man. Obviously, I think that, France is such a strong country, culturally speaking, as well, when it comes down to political matters and inequalities. And I think that it runs in your blood and DNA, which is fantastic. And whether it's coffee or food, but I think it's super, like, going back to context, man. Like, it doesn't sound foreign. It doesn't sound foreign to me. I mean, if you were from a different country, like, oh wow, okay, I didn't see that coming. Not to say trees are better than others, but just to say, you have it in your blood, and it fires you up and it gives you that thrive and drive for, hey, this is what I want to do, and it's really, really, really legit, man. Like, I like it. No, for sure. And well, which brings to kind of the concept that we were talking about before. If someone wants to get started because they don't have a job, they don't have a career, they don't have the opportunities to go to school and become a broker or a finance or a banker or a doctor, how important is as well for yourself to surround yourself with the right mentors? You know, at Toby's Estate, and everyone is a mentor, I get that, but you go Nick, Ray, Josh, Charlotte, of course, and all the other people that you know in the industry. Like how important is, even for professionals and for people who just getting started, to have the right mentors around you?
I think it's extremely, extremely important, of course. And that could be the difference between someone who grows up quickly in the industry and learns faster than someone who doesn't learn as fast. I think it's always really important to surround yourself with mentors. I have plenty of people I look up to, and that I regularly touch base with on a bunch of different topics about coffee, and plenty at Toby's Estates, many overseas. There's some people I've never met physically that I talk to on Instagram, and like you said earlier, we're just 1 or 2 clicks away from anyone in the world. And sometimes that person might not reply to your message, but maybe I've had many friendships actually that emerge from me shooting a message to someone on social media, or vice versa. And I think that that's accessible to everyone. And from my experience, most people would be really keen to share information and to share knowledge, and just to have a chat.
Yeah. And going back to that fear of reaching out, I think that we are in such a right industry to actually reach out to strangers, because that's what we do on a daily basis. A lot of baristas, a lot of coffee people into coffee, they are people. Like, we are in the people business, and I keep banging us about it. It's like we connect with people, whether it's for 30 seconds or for 30 minutes. Therefore, a lot of us are quite comfortable talking and meeting strangers, because that's a core part of what we do. Whether it's wholesale or whether it's retail, it's all about strangers that then become friends and regulars. So it's quite interesting, that we are afraid to reach out to people who are in the same industry, that actually get it, and they're like, hey, it's just another person. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah,
we do that
DM
all the
me.
time, yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who I am, what I've done, what you've done. Let's talk. And that was one of the concepts behind this kind of show. And I hope that even after quarantine, when I'm going to go back full time onto my business, I'll still be able to do it on a weekly basis, because that's exactly what I did with you. I say, yo, ça va? How you doing?
Yeah.
When I come on and chat, like that's exactly what happened. Like we never met. I've seen you around in comps, and now we can both put a name to a face, and we can meet. Oh, actually, we met briefly once at the Q Lab when you weren't working for Toby's, but very briefly. You were
2 years.
You were
ago,
slurping, yeah. So I was like, man, he's doing his thing, man. Like, so which it comes down to what's, I think, important for people to understand, both in the shop and outside the shop in coffee, is to sort of overcome their insecurities and fear of judgment. Baristas is not really seen as a job, like Nicole yesterday was saying this. It's like, oh no, like, what's your job? And when you tell them barista, they ask again. I think that's where it stops a lot of people from reaching out to mentors or to get into the industries, that insecurity and fear of judgment from friends and family. How do you think is a good place, or what do you think is a good thing to do to overcome this kind of road mental block?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I've heard that thing a few times, because I studied management and business, and so I have a bachelor degree and 2 master's degree. And when I decided to not work in strategy consulting, which was what most of my friends did, and started working in coffee, and I was a barista during my studies at the time, everyone's like, that's it? You're gonna make coffee for a living after 2 master's degree and a bachelor degree. And oh, hey, D-Train just turned in.
Yeah, so
Yeah, of course it's not a really good, it's not a great feeling when you hear that, but it's just up to I don't know, I mean I don't really have an answer to or a tip to this, to counter this, but it's more like, I mean, you just got to do your own thing, and if you think that's the right thing to do, then I mean why should you care about what other people think? Seriously, like if you're doing it for yourself and you're happy doing it this way, then that's great. I think one of the important thing that could also change other people's minds in regards to making coffee is not really a job or whatever, is having a clear path in your mind of what you want to do in coffee. What's your end goal? Do you want to be a roaster? Do you want to be a grain buyer? Do you want to open your own cafe or whatever? And sort of try to figure out how you can make that work and how you can make a living out of it. And yeah, because when I first, I mean, it's a funny fact, but when I first started my own business and started doing training and consulting, I was making, it was working really well 6 months after I started it, and I was making way more money than any of my friends who graduated from our school. And I was working in coffee, and I was occasionally making coffee on the weekend, and I was doing latte art sometimes, and I think if you're doing something that you enjoy, and you're somehow good at what you're doing, doesn't really matter what you want to be doing. It doesn't really matter what the industry, if it's coffee, if it's farming, if it's just anything, video games. I have a few friends who were really into video games and they're professional video game streamers, and they make a shitload of money, and they're having fun because that's what they want to do. So is that a real job to play video games all day? And well, I mean, I think it's also a generational thing. I think it's also, we're going to hear less and less than that, because future generations are sort of used to that, and the typical framework of getting a job, going to work, putting on a suit, I think it's all gone now, or it's slowly disappearing.
Eventually, yeah, with the next 2 generations, there's going to be less parents pushing towards that. Hopefully, I really hope so. And it's funny what you mentioned, because it resonated well with me. Your mission was clear. My mission is actually, I changed my mission quite a few months back. Obviously, I run my business. I consult and I run social media marketing for coffee shops, cafes, coffee roasters, and it's my passion because it's coffee. But I also realized that it's important for me in the world to help people to find their passion and their really what they love. And whether it's 1 person or 2 or 3, I'm happy. I really don't care, even if I do it for free. So I get what you're saying. I think a little tool that I just realized for some people in my work listening, or they're gonna rewatch this again or listen on the podcast, if you don't have that strong mindset like Simon had in terms of like not caring, I think maybe having people and really being engaged with the coffee community without having mentors, but go out with 5, 6, 7 other baristas, go out and do social events and have a good time, because those people are going to be constant reminder of your love and passion, because they're going to tell a funny story. They're going to tell, hey, I'm actually going to compete. And all of a sudden, that was going to be refreshing, and it's going to be like, yeah, that's why I'm doing it, because of this community, because of John that comes and grab a flat white every morning, and on Monday tells me what he thought about the game of football, and because I see James, who is my coffee rep, and I really have a good time when I talk to him or her or whatever. So those constant reminders, I think, are essential to kind of overcome as well, that for sure. So you're currently at top business state, and I know that we already nearly spoke for an hour, which is great. And thank you also for coming on, man. So what's kind of next on Simon's planet? That's usually one of the questions that I want to leave with, because it's a good question. I know there's COVID-19, so there's a lot of things that you can't control, but what's next on your planet? That's
a very good question. I wish I knew the full answer to it. but part of the answer is well, definitely going to. I hope I can compete at some point, because I spent so much time preparing for it, and I was so ready for the comp. So yeah, actually getting back to that once COVID is over, I hope that I can finally compete, finally share some of the stuff that I learned along the way. So there's a lot of things that I've been working on in at the same time in parallel during my comp preparation, and I sort of wanted comp to be over to sort of share a lot of this information with the rest of the world. And since COVID happened, I sort of withheld and held on to that stuff. So waiting for this to be, well, waiting to compete. And also we have a lot of things happening at Toby's. So that's going to be one of my big focus in the near future. Things around education, things around training, a lot of things happening. Nick is head of coffee now, not just head roaster, and he's got like a lot of amazing ideas, a great vision, which I really align on with him. And I think, yeah, just being able to pursue that mission, and yeah, we'll see.
Cool, man.
Drink good coffee.
I think I don't need to say it, but you got the right mind frame and framework around you that in terms of, I'm sure that whatever you're next, you're gonna really make it from this little interaction. I can sense it, and I also think the way that you project yourself and you present yourself is also quite your style and unique. So I can almost see you competing, even though I never seen your routine. I can really see that on a visual. Look, hopefully you'll be able to compete. I don't know where and when and how it's going to happen. Someone asked me the other day, how do you think it's going to be in the future or near future comps? And I said, look, maybe they'll have to do it on an almost virtual level, where maybe they just do a huge live stream with all the channels, SCA and ASCA, and the judges are there at 2 meters of distance, and you're actually brewing the coffee there, but maybe without the big crowd, maybe.
Yeah.
But hopefully we won't get to that level, and we'll just re-enjoy our show. Speaking of which, if you're coming down to MICE, which you probably are, if it's still happening, but I really hope to see you and meet you there and grab a coffee together. I say that to everyone because one of my major purpose of this is also meeting you guys in real life, because we have those events where we got that chance as well. So I'm all about that. 1,000%.
So if MICE is taking place, well, this year, I guess. We'll see about that. But yeah, definitely we'll catch up in Melbourne. Normally when COVID is not around, I probably go to Melbourne every month or two. So yeah.
Good. Well, speaking of which, what was your last or latest coffee that you drank in Melbourne, or what was the last thing that impressed you about Melbourne? Just because I always like to see it from someone that comes in Melbourne, because we, maybe not myself, but a lot of us give for granted lots of things that we have. And I know Sydney's huge in coffee. I've been in Sydney for business many times last year, and it's incredible, especially certain suburbs. But what's something that impressed you or that left your last Melbourne trip and you're like, oh, wow, okay, I like that?
Yeah, I think last time I went to Melbourne, what struck me really was how many people drink filter coffee as opposed to, flat whites and cappuccinos in Sydney. So how many people have moved to black coffee, the options that you get in batch brews, filter coffee, but also how knowledgeable this staff is pretty much everywhere. I've had breakfast and brunch in a few places, and the waiter, the waitress there, whoever was attending the table knew so much about coffee, as in knew about origins, different varieties, different processes. I asked what coffee was on the batch brew today, and I remember this girl gave me 3 different options with different processes, and she didn't take for granted that I knew about coffee. So she very briefly and efficiently explained the 3 different processes. So
Wow.
wash, honey, natural. And I thought it was an amazing customer experience. And
Cool,
I
man.
think that's what I get in Melbourne pretty often. I think that the customer service is actually really good. It's pretty friendly, but it's also really professional. Like people know what they're talking about, while still being pretty easygoing, like very
Cool, man.
Aussie style. Yeah.
I think it's a good reminder, and well, probably for someone like you that appreciate education and knowledge, that was probably a huge highlight. Thanks, man.
So
That's good, man. For me, well, just answering that before it's a minute and a half, and Instagram will shut it down. And but I've really enjoyed coming to Sydney last few times because I got to see about 50 to 60 coffee shops in less than a week. Look, I know it's going to sound cliche, but I really was impressed with Marrickville and another few suburbs. I think the variety and options, and even having lots of guest origins, it was like, wow, this is Sydney. Geez, cool. Like,
Yeah.
I really felt like I was in certain Melbourne parts. So I'm not snobby about Melbourne. I think that Melbourne and Sydney, and forgive me, each of them, I think they're quite on path. Maybe Melbourne food is still a little bit more like, has a better average food, more, maybe, but
yeah.
coffee wise, it's getting there, man.
I think Sydney really caught up over the last 2 to 3 years. I think Sydney 4 years ago wasn't what it was, what it is today. I think in maybe 2 years, it sped up really, really quickly. Now it's sort of like on par with Melbourne, I think.
It fired up, yeah, for sure, man. I'm always scared about Instagram because I only give you 30 seconds notice, and it hasn't popped up yet, but I'm sure it's coming soon because I'm looking at the clock. But the stage is yours. Is there anything that you left off the table that you want to share or say, or a last message, please?
Yeah, I guess going back to coffee education for anyone who's watching this afterwards who just tuned up. I think, like you mentioned, I think that's a great advice. If you want to learn more about coffee, if you want to make a career out of it, I think the best thing is always to just reach out to people, just speak to everyone, and that can just be the barista at your local cafe, it can be the owner of that coffee shop, but just, I mean, like you said, it's a social business, and if you're just staying by yourself in your living room trying to make coffee, it's probably not going to be very efficient. And yeah, just speaking to everyone. I think that's probably the best advice I can give in terms of learning quickly.
Thanks, man. Very grateful and very blessed to have you on. Thank you for investing and giving us an hour of your time. Merci beaucoup. That's pretty much all I know.
Thanks for
say hi. Say hi to Charlotte. Actually, she hasn't booked a time yet with me. Maybe she gets too many messages, but maybe hopefully we'll get her on board too. Say hi to Nick. Say hi to the boys and girls that are still working there when I was working there. I wish you all the best. Enjoy the weekend because I'm sure you're still working. And stay safe, my friend. And we'll meet you soon. Thank you for coming, man.
Thanks for hosting. Ciao.
Thank you. Ciao.